Hello, everybody, and welcome back for Unplugged Live, the series where I have chats with real and remarkable people who've made or have incorporated massive changes in their lives to better support themselves and their overall well-being. And today I am so pleased we're going to be joined by Cath Elliott, who is an incredible, remarkable individual. And now Cath, at the age of 46, was sadly diagnosed with breast cancer after discovering a lump in her breast, rushing on her way out to work one morning. Now, from that point, Kath has gone on an incredibly inspiring journey to discover what's important in life, and now, thankfully, a few years later, finds herself cancer free. And we're about to have a bit of a chat about what that journey has looked like for her and all that she's uncovered along the way. So I see that Kath has just joined us. I'm going to add her on in and we'll get started. There we are. Hello.
Yay! Can you see me?
I can see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm good. I'm good today.
That's
Pretty
good.
well.
It's an interesting time here in Melbourne, isn't it?
It really has been. It has been an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. And yeah, I think on any given day you can go through so many different emotions. That's for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm so pleased to see you firstly and actually see your face. I know we've been chatting for a little while, but also to have this conversation today and to share more about your story, because I know in the past we've had a little bit of a chat back and forth about, the inspiring journey that you've really been on, and one that I know earlier on, even today, I heard you mention, was both transformational but also pretty traumatic. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. But to get started, as I always do, I love to begin with a bit of a check-in. So if you were to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is feeling, really exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed, 10 is feeling on top of the world, amazing, where do you reckon you're sitting today?
I think I'm sitting around a 7 today. Yeah, a 7. I've started my day off really well. I've woken up, I've meditated, I've gone for a beautiful walk out in nature, and I have slept reasonably well. So I feel pretty good this morning. But last week, if you'd asked me this time last week, I probably would have been a 5 or a 4.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And even through this series, I've been talking to different people, and even how in the space of a day, you can very quickly go from a 7 or an 8 back to a 2, and back up again. It's been really a roller coaster, that's for sure. And so, like, over, I guess, the past 20 or so months, with all that we've undergone, where would you reckon you've been averaging?
Look, I think I'm a glass half full person, and I think in some ways I was very lucky to have been through cancer before COVID, because having had a life-threatening illness to then followed by going straight into the pandemic, I guess I'd already been through such a personally traumatic experience that coming into COVID didn't actually feel nearly as much of a direct threat to myself. And so a lot of the lessons that I had learnt along the way during that time, I was able to continue to bring into my life. And in some ways, COVID was almost a bit of a retreat and a healing time for me to come back into myself and I guess just start to process some of what I'd just been through.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to dive into that story a little bit more, and talking about you. We've obviously had some conversations in the past, and I definitely do know you and the wonderful person that you are. But for those who don't know you, or maybe haven't come across you before,
I'd love to talk a little bit more about, you know, who is Cass? What kind of have been the pivotal points that have led you to this point, you know, sitting here now having this conversation?
Yeah. Gosh, it's such a complex question, isn't it? Who am I? Is the question we're all constantly asking ourselves, I think, throughout this lifetime. And if you believe you have other lifetimes, it is such a deep question. And I think one of the things that I've really been able to garner in the last 2 years since that day I found the lump in my breast, it was almost like I had a download from something greater to check in with my body and look at it. And that's when I found the lump. I've realized so much about who I am and what is underneath just the physical being that I am so much more than what you see. There is so much in our cells and our energy and the being that we are that we can draw into and upon, particularly in times of trauma. And I learned to trust my body, but also my mind and my intuition. And I think if I look back to the, Kath as the little girl, I was always extremely creative and there was a spiritual side to me. But through conditioning, through, I guess, the family that I was brought up in, just I kind of became very much in my head. And I think I'd become quite hard on myself and quite critical. And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. We all have that little voice in our head. And I guess the last 2 years, the voice that I have there is still there, but it's so much kinder. And I have so much more awareness around it and so much more compassion for that person. And, who am I? Like, I'm a wife, I'm a mother as well. I'm a, entrepreneur trying to start 2 businesses during COVID. There's been so many changes in my life in the last 2 years. I'm still in a lot of grief from what I've been through. Last week, I was going through a lot of tears because there's still a lot of sadness that emerges from the time. And also I'm a big one in wanting to make sense of what it all means. And part of that has been wanting, I guess, to make my life more meaningful and to give back, and to be living more in service rather than living in more of that kind of, I guess, materialistic type world. So my values have changed quite significantly, I think, in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I bet. I guess to go back to that, to go back to that morning, when you say you did have that download and to check something because something didn't feel quite right. What was life like up until that point? I know even in our conversations you talk about how even in that checking it was, in the morning rush of just getting on with the rest of the day. What was life like for you at that time?
Yeah, life was really busy. I was working in a fairly high pressure PR job. I was juggling being a mum to 3 boys, married. We were always I was also getting up really early in the morning to go to the gym. I got into this absolute kind of, it was almost like a frantic type obsession with getting to the gym at 5:15 in the morning. So I was really tired and I was forcing my body to continue to pound itself. And so I think at that point in time, I was a bit harried. I did have, some spiritual practices in my life and I did concentrate on quite a lot of self-care. But I think there was also a part of me that was really ignoring and not listening to the signs that both my body and my mind were giving me at that point in time.
It's hard, I think, sometimes, and I reflect on this in my own experience too, in that, I come from years and years of, 5 a.m. hot yoga every single day, regimented, like, but at the time firmly believed that that was a self-care practice, or that was me having that ability to do something good for myself, and because on paper, whatever it was, hot yoga, morning time, starting your day off just for you, felt like that was ticking a few boxes, that it was something that was meant to be nourishing, but actually in the regime mentality of, it has to look a certain way, or it has to go hard or go home, if you're going to use that time, you have to use it well, but also very much burning the candle at both ends, because trying to do a million different things, and that constant pressure that's been put on, my own shoulders at the time, and so I was just reflecting on that when you mentioned about, the 5:15 gym, and that with a busy life, with a busy career, often, that is your sacred time and your sacred space. So you feel like, using it productively, but actually in the way that that time is often used is probably more to detriment than it is to fulfilling, and nourishing, which is something that I've been thinking about a bit lately around, how even that looks in terms of self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. I now realize that I was exhausted, and I obviously had cancer at the time as well. So my body was sending me messages that I wasn't necessarily listening to, apart from the message that came through that, I had been, I guess, a binge drinker for probably 30 years. I went through many months of not drinking at all. Didn't used to drink during the week. Like, I had all these rules in my life, and I kind of put quite a lot of pressure on myself to adhere to those rules. And one of the ways that I lost control was when I would drink, and I would overdrink, and I would wake up feeling really guilty about it. But it was very normalised in our culture, and I guess it's normalised in many cultures. And yeah, I think in July 2019, just before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I decided it was really time to have a break and to go easy on myself. And I haven't drunk since. There was a point when I was initially diagnosed where it was very traumatic and very stressful. I toyed with the idea of, having a drink, because that's how you deal with stress, right? You numb yourself, you take yourself away. But of course, I then really looked at the situation and realised that, well, alcohol is obviously, a poison, and it also has strong links to causing certain types of breast cancer. So I just realised it wasn't going to be the right thing. And gosh, it has just been the most incredible experience to have lived the past 2 years without drinking. It's been remarkable. It's been so freeing. It's been challenging, but yeah, it's also it's like a new life as well.
I bet, like, rather than that sense of numbing, like actually feeling, and the full gamut and full spectrum of emotions of what it feels like to be human. So on that note, on the morning when you were kind of rushing out the door and heading out, and you did feel that lump, what was going through your mind at that time?
When I found the lump?
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, even try, even I can just feel it now. My heart was beating so hard, and I just knew straight away, like I intuitively knew that something was really, really wrong. And I can feel the tears welling now, because it's a life-changing moment, and you never forget it ever. It's yeah, but a part of me was glad that I knew, and that I wasn't trying to talk myself into everything will be fine. A lot of other people did in those first couple of days, but I just felt this beautiful comfort in myself that I knew what I was dealing with, and that I relied on that intuition to just to show me and lead me, where I needed to go. It's not to say that the first feelings were there was a lot of fear and a lot of shock, and kind of the first few days were like you're living in someone else's life, and it's almost like you're very jet lagged, and you're waking up in the morning and you're feeling really groggy, and then you're like, holy shit, I've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Oh my gosh, really? This time last week I had no idea that I would be here. And you do funny things, like you start flipping through the photos in your phone and going, oh, this time, last week I had no idea. And you look at yourself and you think, that version of myself, there's the line in the sand. After the 21st of August 2019, that's D-Day, and life from that point forward really changes, because initially you think you're going to die, and it comes into your mind. You think, as a healthy, vibrant person of 46, I've never questioned my mortality before, and then all of a sudden it just comes at you like it's so fast and hard, and it hits you, and then you start to worry about your kids and your family and your relationship, and what's going to happen. So all of these questions are going around in your head, and you've got to make sense of it. And then you've also got to start communicating to the people that you love that you're in this situation, and that's another hugely traumatic and stressful experience, because there's all these people who love you, and you're about to give them some news that's really going to affect them. And I found that was tough, because I didn't want to upset people. Yeah, and then I guess I'd come from a marketing, communications, PR background, so I sort of went into a bit of work mode, I guess, messaging mode, where I wanted to have control of my own narrative and my own messaging, and it was really important to me to be positive. I really, from the outset, I wanted to step into that, I was still a really healthy, well and vital woman who had been diagnosed with breast cancer. I didn't want people to look at me as sick or dying or any of those things. So I really stepped into that, and I owned it, and I told people that. And that's the way I wanted to deal with it. And I think that's the thing. Everyone has a choice in their own situation, and that, for me, it felt empowering, and it also allowed me to I guess have some control over how others were when they were around me as well, because it was just going to be too difficult to deal with their own fear and grief initially as well.
Yeah, that sounds to me like there's just so many layers, and that we often talk about how we can't control our environment or experiences, but we can control how we meet it. But then when you have something that's so personal to you, but then you have, you are sharing with those who are closest to you, which will affect them so significantly, just as much as it is for you too, and not having that ability to have that control over their experience, but I guess in a way wanting then to have the most easeful transition, because you were feeling quite positive and upbeat, and although it was really difficult to manage and to sit with, that you were very clear on how you wanted to face it, and to feel like others around you maybe not having that same mindset around it would be difficult, I'd imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the thing. And you know what? Every day is different as well when you're going through something like this, like cancer. It's, treatment's really hardcore. It's full on. It is traumatic. And it becomes your whole life as well for those, initially the 5 or 6 months when I started chemotherapy, it was really, really full on. And I found it really confronting. Even, the first day I went in to have chemo was just really traumatic for me, because just the thought of, putting those kind of poisons into my body, although I knew that there was a very good reason for doing it, it still felt difficult. But I was lucky. I chose to support myself with a lot of other, complementary and natural therapies, as well as Western medicine, which was what I wanted to support me. So I had all sorts of other things that I was bringing into the mix that was that I think, if I went back and did it all again, I'd do exactly the same thing.
That's a nice reflection to be able to have. I'd love you to share, if you're open to doing that, some of those more holistic or supportive modalities or therapies or rituals or whatever it might be that you found really helped you through that time.
Yeah, sure. So I had a beautiful friend of mine, Lucy, who is a Hanuman healer, and she came down most weeks that I had chemotherapy and would do some beautiful healing, some emotional healing on me, which was it was the most intimate experience. We would lie on my bed and she would find the points and talk me through which emotional points she was working on. And we'd both often be in tears, but it was just, it was such a beautiful experience with a friend. And I'm deeply honoured that she drove down from Mornington most weeks to do that for me, which was just amazing. I also had a beautiful kinesiologist who I saw regularly, who again helped me process emotion and face up to emotion that was coming up. Lots of stuff started to come up from the past. I started to reflect back on friendships and relationships that I'd had in the past, and it was really important to sort of make some meaning from them for me. And so that was kind of almost unexpected. I got quite nostalgic, and it was almost like all the sediment that it was sort of sitting there all started to rise, and that's still happening now. There were, I guess I got a perspective on things that I hadn't had before. So there were people that I wanted to contact and say thank you to, or apologise to, or just just to see where things were from the perspective of where I was at in life now, having had the experience that I'd had. And I also had this fantastic oncology naturopath as well, who wrote plans for all of my to support me all the way through my Western treatment, that my oncologist reviewed and looked at as well. So that partnership was just so beneficial. And I still see my oncology naturopath to this day, and I will, I would say for the rest of my life. I also practiced meditation as well. I learnt Veda meditation maybe 6 years ago. So that was an incredibly important tool for me. I used it sometimes during chemotherapy as well, when I needed to really, I wore a cold cap to try and protect losing all my hair, and it was quite painful, and it made the treatment longer and harder. And so the kind of getting back into, I used to meditate beforehand and just try and really get myself into a better headspace to deal with it. And I often noticed that when I didn't meditate beforehand, it was so much harder.
So interesting, isn't it? I've actually never heard of an oncologist or an oncology-based naturopath.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, the Melbourne Integrative Oncology Group. They're in Melbourne, and yeah, Tanya is just amazing. So they are. It's such an incredible service to offer if you're into the more integrative health side of things. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer, and I know through any of my own health conditions or challenges that I've faced in any way that I can, finding a more holistic approach, whether, it's kind of cherry picking different modalities or things that I know just support me, coming at it from more of a 360 approach, rather than that just one-sided kind of treatment has been incredibly helpful for me. And I know, like, even hearing you talk there about the kinesiologist and the naturopath, and really finding that ability to, heal also, not only symptoms and, treating what's there, and in your case, the cancer in and of itself, but also all of the underlying things, the emotional traumas, the things that have been held on or maybe buried in the bag for many, many years. So it sounds like 360, as mentioned there, it's been this incredibly healing time for you.
Yeah, it has. It's been healing, and it's also still been very challenging because the person that comes out the other side isn't the same person that was there before. And so that's kind of what I've been dealing with this last, I think, few months during COVID. There's a real adjustment and a processing of, there's a couple of key relationships in my life that have really, really changed, and it's been traumatic and sad, and there's been grief, and it's not a linear process. Sometimes you feel fine, and then some days you just really don't. And so even just allowing yourself to feel is so important. And that's the other thing I've noticed since, I guess, stopping drinking, is the spectrum of emotion that you have access to is so much greater, because when you've got alcohol in your system all the time, it really is numbing you and anesthetizing you to a point you don't really even notice until you stop. So the highs are, incredible, but the lows you also feel as well. And it's actually been a really beautiful experience for me to really get into the spectrum of all of these emotions that maybe I wouldn't have had access to had I continued to drink. And also, look, having had cancer as well, you do find joy in the more simple, ordinary moments in life, and I absolutely do. So that's one of the other things I practice most days, is just stopping and observing and really noticing just how incredible life really is, just sitting outside and sitting in the garden, listening to the birds, watching my dog chase birds on his morning walk, just taking in some beautiful deep breaths, focusing on the humans in my life that absolutely give me so much love and connection. Those are the important things in life. Human connection is just so important, and that is why it's been so hard these past months in Melbourne. We've all tried to find a way to still connect, but it's been really hard.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I firmly believe community connection, they are, and it is mentioned in terms of mental health and well-being, but I think it's probably the most underspoken about, but most important means of supporting mental health and all things well-being, because we are social creatures. We were always meant to be together. So having had this time where it's been so disconnected and in such a traumatic experience, and not to mention the journey that you've been on, I think it's something that we never really placed as much value on as we do now, and for great reason. So hoping as little bits of freedom start to come through the cracks now, that we can all start to be reunited and really, as you mentioned, just take in those small moments, not the grand gestures, not the huge extravagant experiences that we have, but having the real appreciation and the gratitude for the mundane and the routine and the ordinary, because they're the moments where real gold can be found if we just look for sure.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
So true.
Oh, amazing, isn't it? What a pause can do. But I'm conscious of time, and I feel this has just flown. I feel like
Oh
we've
my
just
gosh,
got
it
it
really has.
started. I know. I feel like we could go on all morning. But I would just love to, firstly, for anyone who is watching this either live or later on, and they want to hear more about you or hear about your story, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I've got a few layers going on at the moment. I've got a number of different Instagram accounts, but I've started 2 businesses. One I'm about to launch this week, called My Breast Friend, which is connected with my breast cancer experience. I've developed a range of self-care body lotions and body washes that help people to come back into their bodies and self-check. So there's self-check instructions on the back, and I will be donating some of the sale of the products back to BCNA, which is Australia's largest consumer organisation for women and men and their families going through breast cancer. And then I have another business, which is an alcohol coaching business now. So I have, where I help people look at their relationship with alcohol, whether that be, it doesn't have to mean you want to completely stop drinking, but it's just, look, if you're having issues with binge drinking, or you want to develop more mindful drinking practices, even just for your own health and well-being, and that business is called the Alcohol Mindset Coach. Yeah,
Awesome.
so I've launched both of those businesses this year. So it's been exciting, but it's also been scary and a massive whirlwind as well.
I bet, from someone who runs a small business and has run a few in the past, it's no small feat launching not one but 2 businesses. My gosh, well done you. That's incredible.
Oh, thank you. I know sometimes I think it was really a crazy thing to do, but then I tap into my heart, and I just feel so grateful that both of these businesses have come through the experience of the last 2 years. If I hadn't had breast cancer or stopped drinking alcohol, I wouldn't. These are like they've been birthed from choices in life, and I actually feel really proud of it and really excited about it now as well.
Amazing. And I love, you mentioned at the beginning there that real calling to be of service, and what better way to do that, through those 2 offerings. That's incredible. And so I guess the very last thing before we go and we head off is, how can we be of service to you? Is there anything that we can help you with, or is there an ask that maybe you can share amongst the community that we can support you with in some way?
So I guess my greatest, one of the things through breast cancer that I've really wanted to communicate to women is to please check in with your bodies every day and just, really get to know your own breasts. You are your own, best breast advocate. And it doesn't matter, start from when you're a young adult, because I wasn't in a practice of self-checking, and I think it's really important that it's something that women bring into their lives. Breast cancer can affect anyone from, the early 20s, and it's just early detection's the key. And if you know your own breasts and you feel something not right, then go and see, your trusted health professional. I'm really big on it. And the other thing is that I've done a lot of research in the past couple of years between the links between alcohol consumption and breast cancer. And if you can drink less for your breasts, please do so. Even dropping a drink per week can reduce your risk by, a couple of %. So it's really important. And drinking when you're young can have an effect on breast cancer when you're older. So if you're a binge drinker in your 20s, it can really affect your outcomes of breast cancer, you know, in your 40s, 50s and 60s. And so that's the platform I'm really trying to get out there. And yeah, so those are the two things that I would really like people to take from this conversation.
Some incredibly wise advice there, and one that I'll definitely be taking on board personally, and I hope anyone watching there can do too. Well, thank you so much, Kath. As mentioned, I feel like I could talk to you here all day. It's been such a pleasure to spend some time with you to hear more about your story, and I know that I've definitely taken a lot from it, so I have no doubt that so many watching now and later on will too. So thank you.
Ash, thank you so much, beautiful, and thank you for all that you do for your community. I can't wait to come and support you down at Elwood Beach soon for another beautiful swim. You're you're doing some great things in the world, and it's beautiful to be in the energy of kind and loving people like yourself. So thank you. It's been a real honor. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Yes, as soon as we can. Thank you, lovely. That sounds lovely.
Bye,
Take
gorgeous.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.